Mythical weapons are a vital part of mythology. From Odin's spear to the arrow of Brahma, tales of magical weapons have been a central part of various mythologies around the world. An almighty force that towers above all others, worthy of only those of noble hearts and true courage. It speaks to the desire of human consciousness to believe that there is more to our mundane and ordinary circumstances. Yet some of these tales bleed into actual verifiable history. How can we tell what is legend and what is history? Before we carry on with our story, I want to remind you to please support your local bard by paying the fee of either one like or one sub. Now, grab yourselves a cup of mead. The tale is about to begin. Excalibur, one of the most famous swords in Western legend. According to the stories, it was a sword of great power and magic, wielded by the legendary King Arthur of England. As to the coming of Excalibur to Arthur, there are more than one version that provide different accounts of the details. According to one version, the sword was originally owned by a powerful sorcerer named Merlin. The sword was originally crafted by Tom the blacksmith, burnished in the dragon Skilgarach's fiery breath at Merlin's request, granting it with the power to kill anything, mortal or magical, living or dead. Merlin gave the sword to Arthur, knowing that only the true King of England could wield it. Additionally, Merlin's influence extends to the enchantments placed upon Excalibur, further infusing the sword with magical properties that go beyond mere physical strength. The sword becomes a symbol of justice, a weapon that cannot be wielded by those without noble intentions. This aspect of Excalibur as a weapon of righteousness echoes Merlin's commitment to preserving the ideals of Camelot. In another version, the sword was said to have been given to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake as a reward for his chivalry and bravery. In this version of the legend, the Lady of the Lake emerges from the waters of the Lake Avalon, holding Excalibur in her hands. This pivotal moment is often portrayed as a symbol of the mystical connection between the beyond and the earthly realm. The lake itself is frequently associated with magical properties, serving as a gateway to the supernatural and a repository of ancient wisdom. The bestowal of Excalibur upon Arthur by the Lady of the Lake signifies a divine transfer of power and authority. In this context, the sword becomes more than a mere weapon. It becomes a sacred instrument, chosen by the mystical forces to be wielded by the rightful king. The Lady of the Lake's role also extends to the retrieval of Excalibur, her relationship extending beyond the initial bestowal. She becomes a recurring presence in Arthur's life, offering guidance and support when needed. Also, it is to her that the sword returns when Arthur meets his end, highlighting the cyclical and eternal nature of the sword's connection to mystical forces. Whatever its origins, Excalibur was more than just a sword. It was a symbol of Arthur's right to rule, said to possess magical powers that made it nearly invincible in battle. The sword was said to glow with a brilliant light, and its mere presence on the battlefield was enough to strike fear into the hearts of Arthur's enemies. But Excalibur was more than just a weapon of war. It was also a symbol of justice and honor. According to the legend, only a true and virtuous knight could wield Excalibur, and only such a knight could be considered worthy to rule England. Arthur himself was said to be a paragon of chivalry and virtue, and his knights followed his example. But as above, so below. The story is also tied to the downfall of Arthur and his kingdom. As we mentioned earlier, when Arthur is mortally wounded in battle, He commands his loyal knight Sir Bedivere to return the sword to the Lady of the Lake. In other versions of the story, the sword is lost or stolen, and Arthur's powers begin to wane as a result. But even after Arthur's death, Excalibur remained an important symbol. Legend has it that the sword is still waiting for a new, worthy king to claim it and restore the glory of Arthur's kingdom. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Excalibur is its connection to the idea of the hero's journey. According to the scholar Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey is a universal archetype that appears in many different cultures and stories. It involves a hero who sets out on a quest, faces many challenges and obstacles, and ultimately emerges victorious, having learned an important lesson along the way. Think of the arc of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Like the young Luke, who was an adopted young man, oblivious of his heritage and potential, so do we have a young Arthur, an untested king who must prove his worthiness to rule. He sets out on a quest to find the sword, and he faces many challenges and enemies along the way. Ultimately, he emerges victorious, having learned important lessons about the nature of leadership, justice, and the responsibilities that come with power. Excalibur, in this context, becomes the symbol of the hero's journey, a tangible representation of the transformative experiences and growth that the hero undergoes. The historic authenticity of King Arthur remains the subject of much debate among scholars and historians. While the legend of King Arthur has become an integral part of Western folklore and literature, there is limited concrete evidence to support the existence of an actual historical figure named Arthur who fits the description provided in the legendary tales. The primary challenge in verifying the historicity of King Arthur stems from the fact that the Arthurian legends were transmitted orally for centuries before being recorded in written form. The earliest written account of Arthur comes from sources such as Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae, or History of the Kings of Britain, in the 12th century, and later works like Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur in the 15th century. And if anyone from France is listening, please excuse me if I butcher the name.
Oh, sacre bleu!
These texts, however, are more literally compositions than reliable historical records. One prevailing theory posits that the legend of King Arthur may have been inspired by a historical figure or a conglomeration of figures who lived during the tumultuous period of the late 5th to early 6th century. This was a time when the Roman Empire had withdrawn from Britain, leaving the region vulnerable to invasions by the Anglo-Saxons. Some scholars suggest that a leader, possibly a military commander, emerged to resist these invasions and became the basis for the Arthurian legend. As historians grapple with the question of whether a real King Arthur ever walked the lands of Britain, the search of Excalibur's historic authenticity encounters similar challenges. The legendary sword, with its magical properties and mystical origins, is entwined with the same elusive threads of myth and reality. Excalibur, like King Arthur himself, resides with an almost certainty in the realm of mystery and imagination. Whether forged by a skilled blacksmith, bestowed by the Lady of the Lake, or embedded in a stone waiting for a true heir, the sword transcends its material existence to become a symbol of nobility, justice, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. My good citizens, thank you very much for listening to this tale. Please remember to join our warm hearth by hitting that subscribe button. Farewell, and may the gods smile upon you.